What do you think I'm running here? A summer camp for dreamers? Douglas tore the pages from my notebook and crumpled them in his fist. 2 years of education, and suddenly you're redesigning our entire product line? This isn't innovation, Hannah. It's garbage. He dropped the wadded papers into the trash bin beside my desk, making deliberate eye contact as each one fell. Behind him, Gwen and Patrick pretended to focus on their monitors, but I could see the slight curl of their lips, the shared glances. The cleaning solution assignment was simple. Douglas continued, voice lowered but perfectly audible to everyone. Test the existing formula against competitors. Period. Not, whatever, amateur chemistry experiment you've concocted here. He tapped the bin with his foot. Stay in your lane, or find another job. Plenty of 40-somethings would kill for your position. The heat crawled up my neck as I nodded, unable to speak. 6 months of early mornings and late nights, documenting how our standard cleaner created a unique reaction with certain plastic compounds. Gone. Douglas straightened his tie, satisfied with my silence. Team, meeting in 10. Bring the competitor analysis reports. The real ones. As the lab emptied, I stared at my crumpled research in the trash. What stung most wasn't the humiliation or wasted work. It was that I'd discovered something genuinely valuable. Something that could transform how we handled plastic waste. But in Douglas's kingdom, ideas only mattered if they were his. Before we go any further, thank you for spending time with my story today. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. I'd love to know who's keeping me company through this mess. My name is Hannah Pierce. At 42, I was the oldest entry-level lab technician at True Green Solutions. Not the career trajectory I'd planned. My doctorate in chemical engineering should have put me in a senior research position somewhere prestigious. Instead, after my previous company collapsed and 3 promising interviews ended with, "We're looking for someone who'll grow with us long-term," I landed here, testing cleaning products, running basic analyses, being grateful. The first month, I kept my head down, learned the equipment, memorized procedures, stayed late to organize supply cabinets nobody else bothered with. Douglas seemed pleased enough, in his distracted way. He'd been at the company 15 years, rising from sales to somehow heading research and development despite no formal science background. Know what matters more than degrees, he told me during orientation, gesturing to his office. Understanding what executives actually want. Nobody cares about chemical bonds. They care about quarterly profits. I nodded along. Didn't mention my publications or patents from my previous job. Those belonged to a different life. Then came the day I noticed something unusual. A test batch of our standard cleaner had been mixed incorrectly, too much of an acidic compound. When I wiped it up, the plastic sample container began breaking down in a way I'd never seen before. Not melting exactly, decomposing, returning to individual polymers. After work, I stayed to investigate. The compound wasn't corrosive to skin or harmful to breathe, just uniquely effective against certain plastics. I began keeping a separate notebook, documenting tests with different plastic types, concentrations, temperatures. For 6 months, I worked on it secretly. Arrived at 6 a.m. when the building was empty, used minimal supplies, documented everything meticulously. The potential was enormous. A non-toxic compound that could break down plastic waste without harmful byproducts. I made the mistake of growing confident, started testing during lunch breaks, left my notebook out one evening. That's when Douglas noticed. The week after he trashed my research, everything changed. An email announced the CEO would visit with potential investors. Something about a green initiative and sustainability partnerships. Nobody knew details, but the upper floors buzzed with activity. I was inventorying cleaning supplies when I overheard Douglas in the hallway, speaking excitedly on his phone. Yes, completely biodegradable, revolutionary approach to plastic waste. Been developing it right under everyone's noses. Perfect timing with these investors. My stomach twisted. He couldn't be talking about my research. He'd thrown it away, called it garbage. That afternoon, I watched him rush between departments, collecting reports, summoning team leaders for impromptu meetings. He didn't glance my way once. Danny from accounting stopped by my station. "You hear about the big shots coming tomorrow? Word is, they're ready to drop serious money on some environmental breakthrough." "Any idea what kind?" I asked casually. "Something about plastic decomposition," she shrugged. Douglas has been strutting around like he personally saved the planet. That night, I couldn't sleep. 6 months of work, dismissed, then possibly stolen. But without proof, what could I do? My original notes were gone. The samples I'd kept at home weren't enough to establish primacy. Morning arrived with unusual commotion. Security directed visitors to conference rooms. Staff wore their Friday best on a Tuesday. At 9 a.m. sharp, CEO Julian Gray and 3 impeccably dressed investors toured the building. I watched from my corner as Douglas guided them, pointing out equipment and processes with unearned authority. "We'll see the demonstration in Lab 3, he announced, leading them toward my department. I followed at a distance, heart racing. Through the glass walls, I watched Douglas gesture expansively, describing something that made the investors nod appreciatively. Then he moved toward the testing station, my testing station, and picked up a vial of what looked suspiciously like my formula. The breakthrough came when the lab door opened. Len, the night janitor, stepped in alongside a younger woman with intelligent eyes and a questioning expression. Behind them stood Julian Gray. "Sorry to interrupt," the CEO said, "but Dr. Zhang has some questions about the compound." Douglas froze, vial suspended midair. "Dr. Zhang? Environmental chemist," the woman said, extending her hand. "My father showed me samples he found while cleaning. I analyzed them last week and contacted Mr. Gray immediately. The decomposition properties are remarkable." "Samples," Douglas repeated, his confident smile slipping. "From the testing station trash," Len clarified. "Been watching someone work late for months. Seemed important, so when I saw the formulas tossed out, I grabbed them." The CEO turned to Douglas. "I assumed you'd fill me in on this project yesterday, when I mentioned investors. Strange, you didn't." "I was compiling comprehensive data," Douglas stammered. "Wanted the complete picture before." "Who's the primary researcher?" Dr. Zhang interrupted, scanning the lab. Her eyes settled on me, hovering by the doorway. "Was it you?" The notes had a distinctive handwriting. Every head turned. Douglas's face tightened as the CEO motioned me forward. "You work in this department?" Julian asked. "Yes, sir. Hannah Pierce. And did you create this formula?" I felt Douglas's gaze burning into me. 6 months of dismissal and derision weighed against this moment of recognition. "I discovered the reaction accidentally," I said carefully, "and have been documenting variations for the past 6 months." "Where's your research now?" Dr. Zhang asked. "I'd like to review your methodology." The room went perfectly still. Douglas's knuckles whitened around the vial. "My notes were discarded," I said, looking directly at him. "Last Tuesday afternoon." The CEO's eyebrows rose. "Discarded? Why would groundbreaking research be thrown away?" Before Douglas could speak, Len stepped forward. "I saved most of the pages. Thought they might be important. They're in my locker." I watched Douglas's carefully constructed world begin to crumble. His smile vanished. His shoulders stiffened. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked afraid. "Mr. Gray," he began, "there seems to be a misunderstanding." "The security cameras," Gwen suddenly said from her workstation. Every head turned toward her. She flushed but continued. "They would show, they record everything in the labs, for intellectual property protection." Julian Gray's expression hardened. "Indeed they do. Let's review that footage immediately. Dr. Zhang, would you accompany us? And Miss Pierce, we'll need you as well." As they led me out, Douglas caught my arm. "You need me," he hissed under his breath. "This isn't how the game is played." I pulled away, following the CEO toward the security office, aware that whatever happened next would permanently change everything. The research they were so excited about, my biodegradable plastic solution, could be worth far more than my job, and Douglas knew it. What I didn't know was whether the truth would matter enough to overcome his years of influence and careful relationship building, or whether standing up now would just mark me as trouble, slamming even more doors in my face. But as we walked, Dr. Zhang fell in step beside me. "Those formulations showed remarkable ingenuity," she said quietly. "Whoever created them understands polymer chemistry at a fundamental level. For the first time in years, someone was actually seeing my work. Not my age, not my position, my work. And the realization gave me the courage to continue walking toward whatever came next." The security office was surprisingly small. A windowless room lined with monitors showing every corner of the building. Rick, the head of security, pulled up Tuesday's footage with a few clicks. "What time are we looking for?" he asked. "Around 3 p.m., I said. "Lab 3. The footage played in crisp detail. There I was at my station, hunched over my notebook. Douglas approached, words inaudible but body language clear. Then came the moment, him ripping pages from my notebook, crumpling them, dropping them deliberately into the trash. The camera caught his smirk as he walked away. Dr. Zhang leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Can you zoom in on those pages?" Rick enlarged the image. Even crumpled, the chemical formulas were visible. "Those match the samples we tested," Dr. Zhang confirmed, turning to Julian. "This is definitely the compound that breaks down polyethylene terephthalate." Julian's expression darkened as he watched Douglas return to the frame, check that I'd left, then fish the pages back out of the trash. On screen, Douglas smoothed several papers, examined them, then tucked them into his jacket before replacing the rest in the bin. "He kept some of your research," Julian said quietly. My hands trembled. He must have realized its potential after dismissing it. Julian turned to Rick. "Show me this morning's footage of Lab 3. The screen switched to Douglas earnestly explaining something to the investors, gesturing to notes laid out on the workbench. "My notes." Julian stood. "I've seen enough. Miss Pierce, join me in conference room A with Dr. Zhang and our investors. Rick, please escort Mr. Westcott there as well. And Len, bring those saved notes." The next hour blurred together. I sat at an oval table answering technical questions while Douglas waited outside, visible through frosted glass. Dr. Zhang grew increasingly animated as I explained my methodology. "The reaction creates a controlled polymer breakdown without toxic byproducts," I demonstrated with diagrams. "It's cost-effective and scalable." Julian's phone buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, stepping out. Through the glass, I watched him speak to Douglas, whose gestures grew increasingly frantic. When Julian returned, his decision was clear. "Miss Pierce, we'd like you to head this project moving forward. The investors are prepared to fund immediate development with a $600,000 initial investment." Dr. Zhang smiled, "With potential for much more, if scale testing confirms these results." "But I'm just a lab tech," I said, "with a doctorate in chemical engineering and what appears to be a groundbreaking discovery." Julian replied, scanning my personnel file. "I'm curious why you're not in our research division already." Before I could answer, the door opened. Douglas entered, composed but with tension radiating from his shoulders. "Julian, a word?" His voice was professionally smooth, but his eyes darted nervously. "Actually, I think we need group clarity," Julian replied. "Miss Pierce's research is impressive. The investors are enthusiastic, but I'm concerned about how her work was handled." Douglas straightened. "As department head, I make difficult decisions daily about which projects deserve resources. Hannah's testing wasn't authorized because you repeatedly denied her requests," Julian interrupted, holding up a folder. "I've reviewed 6 months of departmental communications. She followed protocol. You blocked her." The air in the room changed. Douglas's carefully cultivated image of competent leadership cracked visibly. "I've organized an all-hands meeting tomorrow," Julian continued. "We'll announce the new project with Miss Pierce leading research and development. Mr. Westcott, we'll discuss your position afterward." After they left, I sat alone in the conference room, stunned. 6 months of dismissal undone in an hour. But rather than satisfaction, anxiety gnawed at me. Douglas wouldn't accept defeat easily. He'd spent years building alliances, embedding himself in the company's structure. And now I'd humiliated him. That night, my phone rang repeatedly. Colleagues I barely knew, suddenly wanting details. My email filled with congratulations from people who'd never spoken to me. But one message stood out. My office. 7 a.m. Douglas. I arrived at 6:30 instead, making copies of my remaining research and emailing them to my personal account. Protection, just in case. At exactly 7, Douglas appeared. Gone was the aggression of yesterday, replaced with a practiced humility that didn't reach his eyes. "Hannah," he began, perching on the edge of my desk. "Yesterday was unfortunate, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." I said nothing, watching him. "We both want the same thing, success for this project. I have connections, experience navigating the corporate structure. You have the technical knowledge." He leaned closer. We could be powerful allies. You threw my research in the trash, I said quietly. Called it garbage. Heat of the moment. I was dealing with budget pressures. He waved dismissively. Water under the bridge. What matters is moving forward strategically. The old Hannah would have nodded, accepted his non-apology, grateful to avoid conflict. But something had shifted. I'd seen behind his mask now. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I need to prepare for the announcement meeting. His smile tightened. Consider carefully. New projects fail all the time. Funding disappears. Priorities shift. Having the right champion matters. The threat hung between us. Before I could respond, Julian appeared in the doorway. Ah, there you both are. Miss Pierce, could you join us? The investors have more questions. As I gathered my notes, Douglas whispered, remember, enemies close, friends closer. The company announcement transformed everything. Standing beside Julian as he introduced me to 400 employees, I barely recognized my life. Overnight, I went from invisible to essential. My tiny workstation became a dedicated lab. My team grew from 0 to 5 researchers. My budget expanded to include equipment I'd only dreamed of using again. Through it all, Douglas watched. He maintained his title, but lost responsibility for the most exciting project in company history. In meetings, he offered help too eagerly, suggested modifications to my protocols, introduced me to executives with pointed reminders of his own connections. Hannah, have you met Jason? He and I play golf every weekend. He controls manufacturing capacity. Think that approach will scale? My experience suggests caution. Just trying to help. The board appreciates regular updates. I'm happy to present your findings. Save you the trouble. 2 months into development, our prototype exceeded expectations. The compound broke down plastic completely within days instead of centuries, leaving only environmentally safe residue. Patent applications were filed. Manufacturing plans drafted. Investors doubled their commitment. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I grew increasingly uneasy. Little things kept happening. Test samples disappeared. Equipment malfunctioned. A crucial report was deleted from the server. Thankfully, after I'd backed it up. Teething problems, Julian assured me when I mentioned my concerns. Happens with every major project. But I knew better. These weren't accidents. The breaking point came during our first major presentation to TrueGreen's executive board. I'd prepared for weeks, compiling data, rehearsing explanations, anticipating questions. 15 minutes before the meeting, I discovered my presentation files had been replaced with an older, error-filled version. There wasn't time to fix everything. I'd have to present incomplete data, looking unprepared and amateur. In the bathroom, splashing water on my face, I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Unfortunate timing, Douglas said to someone. But that's the risk of rushing innovation. Some people aren't ready for pressure. Think she'll recover? Asked a voice I recognized as Jason, from manufacturing. We'll see. I've kept detailed records of the project's actual progress, just in case the board needs. Context. Their footsteps faded. I leaned against the wall, heart racing. This wasn't just sabotage. It was calculated destruction. Douglas wasn't trying to regain control. He was ensuring that if he couldn't have the project, neither could I. I had 15 minutes to save my reputation and possibly my career. With shaking hands, I called Dr. Zhang. I need every test result you've documented. Right now. It's an emergency. She didn't question me, just started sending files. I pieced together what I could, filling gaps from memory. As board members filed into the conference room, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't presenting the expected technical briefing. Instead, I would show them something far more valuable, the truth. Douglas sat at the far end of the table, notepad ready, a slight smile playing across his lips. He nodded encouragingly as Julian introduced me, the perfect, supportive colleague, ready to step in when I failed. I connected my laptop, took a deep breath, and began. Today, I'd like to show you something different than what's on the agenda, I said. Instead of just our progress, I want to reveal how innovation actually happens and how easily it can be destroyed. I pulled up side-by-side timelines, my original research dates alongside Douglas's department records, security footage showing missing equipment being moved, server logs documenting file changes. Douglas's smirk slowly disappeared as he realized what was happening. Innovation requires truth, I continued. And the truth is, this project has succeeded despite systematic efforts to undermine it. Board members exchanged glances. Julian leaned forward, brow furrowed. Douglas's face drained of color. Miss Pierce, the board chair interrupted. These are serious accusations, with evidence supporting everyone, I replied, clicking to the next slide, including this morning's sabotage of my presentation files. Douglas stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's paranoid, feeling overwhelmed. The server logs don't lie, I said quietly. They show exactly who accessed and modified my files at 8:43 this morning. The room fell silent. Douglas remained standing, caught between fight and flight. I don't present this to assign blame, I continued, softening my tone, but to illustrate a critical point about our company culture. Breakthrough innovation doesn't thrive in environments where people fear taking credit or losing position. It grows where ideas matter more than egos. For 3 hours, the board questioned us both, examined evidence, reviewed my actual research progress. When they finished, Julian asked us to wait outside while they deliberated. In the hallway, Douglas finally dropped his mask. You've made a terrible mistake, he whispered, standing too close. Even if they believe you, no one likes a whistleblower. You'll be that difficult woman who couldn't play nicely. Every future accomplishment will be questioned. He might have been right, but I'd spent too long being invisible, watching others take credit for work they didn't respect. Whatever came next, I wouldn't go back to that life. The boardroom door opened. Julian beckoned us both inside. We've reached several decisions, the chair announced. First, the plastic decomposition project will continue under Miss Pierce's leadership with expanded funding. Second, we're implementing structural changes to encourage innovation at all levels. He turned to Douglas. And finally, we're reassigning you, Mr. Westcott. Your experience is valuable, but not in research and development. Douglas's jaw tightened. Where? Strategic consulting. Reporting directly to me, Julian said. I want a complete audit of how ideas move through our organization. Who better than someone who understands the obstacles? It wasn't firing. It wasn't even officially a demotion, but everyone in the room understood exactly what had happened. As the meeting ended, Douglas brushed past me. This isn't over, he murmured. Not even close. Looking at his rigid back, tight shoulders, I believed him. This was just the beginning, and whatever came next would test everything I thought I knew about survival in this world we'd created. 6 weeks passed. The project accelerated, attracting attention beyond our industry. Environmental publications requested interviews. Competitor stocks fluctuated whenever we announced progress. My team expanded to 12 researchers across 2 labs. On paper, everything was perfect. Reality told a different story. Douglas had transformed. Gone was the openly dismissive boss, replaced by someone far more dangerous, a man playing the long game. He attended every meeting, offering insightful comments and supportive nods. Executives who'd known him for years saw a reformed team player. Only I recognized the calculation behind his cooperative smile. Impressive progress, Hannah, he'd say in front of others. Let me know how I can support you. Then somehow investors would receive misleading information about production timelines. Equipment we needed would be delayed for budget reconsideration. Key personnel would be temporarily reassigned to urgent projects. Nothing traceable, nothing provable, just constant, invisible friction. Julian visited the lab regularly, impressed by our advances, despite the obstacles. The board is discussing commercial applications, he told me one afternoon. They're thinking beyond cleaning products now. Waste management systems, recycling centers, environmental remediation. That's bigger than I expected, I admitted. Much bigger, he agreed. Which is why they're bringing in someone to handle the business development side. You'll still lead research, but they want experienced hands managing market strategy. Something in his tone made me uneasy. Julian hesitated. Douglas has relationships with the distributors we'd need. The board feels... No, the word escaped before I could stop it. Julian, he's been sabotaging us from day one. If you give him any control... It's not control, it's partnership, Julian said firmly. And the decision's made. We announce next week. That night, I couldn't sleep. Everything I'd built was being handed back to the person who'd thrown it away. Douglas wouldn't rest until he'd reclaimed complete ownership, erasing my contribution entirely. The next morning, Gwen caught me before I reached the lab. Emergency meeting in conference room B. Now, inside, my entire team sat stone-faced around the table. Patrick pushed a tablet toward me. On screen was an internal memo about organizational restructuring for market preparation. "They're splitting the project," he said. "Research stays with you, but everything else, funding decisions, production planning, external communications, goes to Douglas's new Strategic Development Division." I scanned the document, nausea building. This isn't partnership, it's dismantling. "There's more," Aaron said quietly. "3 of us are being transferred to his team next month for coordinated messaging," Aaron said, and my hands trembled. Douglas had orchestrated the perfect takeover. He couldn't claim my discovery, so instead, he was building walls around it, controlling who saw our research, how it was implemented, and which parts actually made it to market. "What can we do?" Patrick asked. I had no answer. Fighting openly would make me appear difficult, reinforcing Douglas's whispered narrative that I was brilliant but uncooperative. Complaining to Julian would accomplish nothing. He'd already chosen sides. Later that day, as I worked late documenting test results, a shadow fell across my desk. Douglas stood in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this," he said, placing one beside me. "Long hours you're keeping." I didn't touch it. "What do you want?" "To clear the air." He sat uninvited. "This rivalry between us is counterproductive." "Rivalry implies equal standing," I said. "You're systematically taking over my project." He didn't deny it. "Business is business. Nothing personal." "It feels pretty personal from where I'm sitting." Douglas sipped his coffee. "You're looking at this all wrong. I'm offering you protection, recognition for your work. Your name will be on everything, just not in control of anything. Control is overrated. Influence is what matters." He leaned forward. "The board wants marketable results. I know how to deliver those. You don't. Simple as that. By stripping away everything innovative about the formula, making it just another cleaning product instead of environmental technology." Something flickered in his eyes. "So, you've seen the revised implementation plans?" I hadn't, but his confirmation told me everything. They were already changing the project's direction. "You don't understand what we've created," I said. "This compound could help address the plastic crisis. It's worth billions, not as a premium bathroom cleaner, but as environmental technology." Douglas stood. "That decision isn't yours to make anymore. Adaptation begins next week. The board wants immediate commercial applications." "They're wrong." "Perhaps," he shrugged, "but they signed the checks." After he left, I sat motionless, coffee cooling untouched. 6 months of work, countless hours of research, a discovery that could actually matter, all being reduced to a slightly better bathroom cleaner because it was safer, easier to package and sell. Something broke inside me, not in a dramatic, shattering way, more like the quiet snap of a twig underfoot, small but irreversible. The next morning, I called Dr. Zhang. "I need advice," I said when she answered, professional and otherwise. We met at a cafe 3 miles from the office. For 2 hours, I outlined everything: the original discovery, Douglas's interference, the current situation. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "So they're repurposing environmental technology as a consumer product," she summarized. "Technically legal, but ethically questionable. And I can't stop it," I added. Dr. Zhang studied me. "What do you actually want, Hannah? Money? Recognition? Control?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? "I want it used properly," I finally said. "This formula could help solve real problems. Instead, they'll dilute it into window cleaner." She nodded slowly. "I might have a suggestion, but it's not without risk." 2 days later, I submitted my complete research documentation to Julian. Every test, every formula variation, every potential application. An unprecedented level of detail, organized meticulously. "Impressive," he said, flipping through the binder. "This will help the transition team tremendously." "I want it to be thorough," I replied. "Everything should be recorded properly." That evening, Douglas emailed the entire department. "Exciting news! Our revitalization product enters production planning Monday. Congratulations to all involved. Revitalization product. Not environmental technology. Not plastic decomposition solution. A rebrand so complete it erased the discovery's purpose. Monday morning arrived with unexpected commotion. Security guards stood at lab entrances. Executives hurried between meetings. Julian was nowhere to be found. At 10 a.m., an all-staff email announced an emergency gathering in the main conference room. I joined the confused crowd, filing in to find board members seated at the front, expressions grim. Douglas stood to one side, face ashen. The board chair stepped forward. We've called this meeting to address a serious situation concerning intellectual property and corporate ethics. On the screen behind him appeared a split image, our company logo beside another I didn't recognize. This morning, Global Environmental Solutions announced a major breakthrough in plastic decomposition technology. Technology suspiciously similar to our proprietary research. Murmurs spread through the room. Douglas's eyes found mine, narrowing with sudden comprehension. The chair continued. Our legal team is investigating how our confidential work was compromised. Until we understand the extent of the breach, all related projects are suspended. All research staff will submit to interviews. As people departed, Douglas intercepted me in the hallway, gripping my arm painfully. What did you do? He hissed. I removed his hand. Nothing. You can prove. I think you can prove. For 3 days, investigators combed through records, examined server access logs, interviewed everyone connected to the project, found nothing conclusive. Because there was nothing to find. I hadn't leaked any documents, hadn't emailed confidential information, hadn't copied files to external drives. What I had done was significantly more elegant. In my detailed documentation to Julian, I'd included everything about our compound, except one critical catalyst that activated the decomposition process. Without it, the formula was incomplete, functional for cleaning purposes but useless for breaking down plastics. Meanwhile, Dr. Zhang had connected me with legitimate environmental scientists at Global Solutions. I hadn't given them our formula. Instead, I'd helped them understand the theoretical approach, a pathway anyone with sufficient expertise could follow independently. They'd developed their own compound, similar in purpose but chemically distinct, no intellectual property violated. On the 4th day, Julian called me to his office. Douglas was already there, along with 2 board members. Explain something, Julian began, without preamble. Global's patent application describes technology remarkably similar to ours conceptually, but with a completely different chemical structure, almost as if someone told them what was possible without telling them how we did it. I met his gaze steadily. Parallel development happens in science all the time, especially when the research direction is obvious to anyone paying attention, I added. Our approach wasn't the only possibility, just the one we chose. Douglas slammed his hand on the desk. She sabotaged us. Our market advantage is gone. You have no evidence of that? I said calmly. And technically, our formula still works better for household applications. It's just not exclusive for environmental use anymore. The implications hung in the air. Our company could still produce consumer cleaning products as planned, but the larger environmental market, the billion-dollar opportunity, would now be competitive. With Global Solutions already publicizing their commitment to environmental applications rather than consumer products. Exactly the direction Douglas had rejected. You've destroyed shareholder value, one board member said quietly. I've ensured the technology will be used as intended, I corrected. By someone. They fired me that afternoon, escorted me out with a severance agreement and confidentiality clause. No references, no acknowledgement of my contribution. 6 weeks later, Global Solutions announced they were hiring me as Director of Environmental Applications. Douglas's bathroom cleaner launched the same month to modest sales. The stock dropped 15%. 2 quarters after that, our formula's incomplete nature became apparent. Without the catalyst I'd omitted from documentation, the product experienced stability issues. Recalls followed. Douglas was quietly dismissed after consumer complaints mounted. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, watching from my new office as True Green's reputation crumbled, I felt hollow. The company that had given me a chance when others wouldn't was struggling. People who'd had nothing to do with Douglas's decisions were losing jobs. My revenge had worked perfectly. The technology was being used to help the environment. Douglas had lost everything. I had a better position, with higher pay. Yet something essential had broken in me during those months of fighting. The passion that had driven my late nights and early mornings was replaced by caution. The joy of discovery was shadowed by memories of betrayal. Yes, I'd won, but victory tasted nothing like I'd imagined. Dr. Zhang found me working late one evening, 6 months into my new role. "The Indonesia implementation is impressive," she said, reviewing my projections. "This technology will remove thousands of tons of plastic waste annually." "That's the goal," I replied. She studied me. "You don't seem satisfied." I stared at the report spread across my desk. I thought justice would feel different. "Justice and revenge aren't the same thing," she said gently. "One heals, the other just creates new wounds." I think about that often now, how in fighting monsters, we risk becoming them. How victory can feel like loss when it comes at the cost of your own humanity. My name is etched on patents that are changing the world. My former company has been acquired for pennies on the dollar, and Douglas works at a regional distributor, his reputation permanently stained. I got everything I thought I wanted, and lost something irreplaceable in the process. If you've stayed with me through this story, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on your own battles. Comment below about a time when winning didn't feel like you expected. Subscribe if my journey resonated with you. And remember, in the war to protect what matters, guard your spirit as carefully as your ideas. Some victories aren't worth their price.